Your counter. Adventure level 7. Orc. Nulavan. It didn't take long for the feasting to get underway. Gnomes, dwarves, elves and orcs brought various things out of the tree buildings and set up stalls, which almost immediately began serving drinks and cooking food. Watching a city gather together and feast without any preparation or planning is quite the novel experience. It almost seemed practiced. "Hey, guys," Nick said, tearing my attention away from the various stalls popping up. "I'm sorry that I wasn't honest with you earlier." "You did what you had to do, right?" I asked with a knowing smile. Yeah. Then there's no need for an apology." "Well, I mean, I could have taken you to his side and explained what was going on." He rubbed his neck. "Oh, so you've learned from this experience as well?" I asked with a laugh. "Even better." I had figured that there was a reason he wasn't forthcoming regarding the divine interference in our journey. Either the supposed deity had flat out told him not to be, or he didn't want people to think he was some sort of religious nut. Given that he is likely unaware of the atrocities committed by aforementioned fanatics, and how they are subsequently treated, it's possible the divine interference came with a warning. Nick was still having trouble making eye contact, though. "Listen, boy," Nash interrupted. "I can't speak for other species, but for orcs, apologies are for victims. While it would have been nice to be in the know, I don't feel like a victim for being excluded. Do you, York?" "No." I shook my head. "I, for one, feel a little victimized," Rem said with a laugh. "I'm not biased or anything. I wouldn't have treated you any different, even if you'd let me know I was traveling with a touched." "A touched?" Nick asked. "Yes, someone who is touched by the gods," I explained. "Or, in a more colloquial sense, someone who is touched in the head with hallucinations and delusions of grandeur. That's probably not what Rem meant, though." "It definitely isn't," Rem said, raising his hands defensively. We all had a chuckle and started touring the festivities. Nick began asking about some of the local food, and Rem acted as a guide. Nash and I waited patiently for Nick and Rem to fill a platter, before wandering over to a stall that was serving something that we could eat. The smell of fried meat hit my nostrils like a club, and I had to swallow my mouth's immediate reaction. Nash's stomach growled as we grabbed our own platters to fill. Once we were finished, the four of us found some refreshment and took a seat on the ground nearby. As I bit into my meal, I noticed people staring at Nick with shocked expressions. He was eating both meat and vegetables simultaneously. I chuckled as I finally remembered my own reaction at learning of his omnivorousness. I swallowed my mouthful and took a swig of my sparkling beverage, enjoying the tingling feeling that it applied to my somewhat parched throat. "Is that Yolk I see?" a familiar voice asked from behind me. All four of us turned to look at the newcomer. Before us stood an elven woman with bright orange hair, blue-green eyes and a youthful face. This youthfulness was deceitful, for while she appeared no more than 20 years old, I knew her age to be at least in the triple digits. "Almira, how are you?" I asked with a grin. "Flummoxed," she replied with an exaggerated sigh. "I received word that an unknown sentient species is visiting the Regent. Then our true king awakens. And finally, I run into my former student out of the blue. What a day." "I wouldn't say you ran into me out of the blue. The reason we originally came here was to have you help us determine the origin of Nick, the unknown sentient species in question." I gestured at the boy for dramatic effect. "However, King Asinrath appears to have stolen this job from you." "Oh, that's a shame." She casually turned to look at Nick and froze once she realized what she was looking at. Almira the Eternal is extremely intelligent, but she is not without her faults. The reason she exiled herself to a tower was mostly due to her lack of social grace, which is caused directly by her lack of situational awareness. If she was reading a book in a room that was on fire, she likely wouldn't notice the fire until the book was no longer legible. It occurred to me that her lack of situational awareness would make it nearly impossible for her to accidentally notice me, which means she had lied about running into me out of the blue. She must have been looking for me, which means she had been looking forward to seeing me again. Likely because she knows me well enough to know that whatever I would need her help with will be quite intellectually stimulating. Almira said, as she leaned towards Nick. Hi, he said, leaning away slightly. Was that speech? She absentmindedly asked while studying the boy intently. It was. Did you think that I named him Nick? I laughed. He can talk, walk, and fight. He? Very well. Why does he have a platter with plants and meat? Because he needs to eat a mixture of both to maintain optimum health. He's an omnivore. Almira asked several more questions about Nick, which I delightfully answered. Nick remained quiet and nervous throughout this exchange, which I found a tad confusing. I would understand if he was flustered. I'm told Almira is quite conventionally attractive, but his reaction was more akin to a barely contained flight or fight response. I don't think she's going to bite you, boy, Nash interrupted. Oh, right. Yes, my apologies, Nick, Almira said, standing straight once again. I see you are aware that I am a vampire. He's been briefed, I laughed. Interestingly, in his world, all of the species of our world are detailed in legends, but are considered quite fictional. Vampires as well. Almira's eyes brightened, and before we could begin discussing the implications of this, Regent Oakmore approached us. He had run off earlier, presumably to inform people of the feast, and was now looking a tad tired. There you are, he grinned. I hope you're enjoying Bolasir's hospitality. Yes, sir, Nash replied. Excellent. The Regent knelt next to us. Now, from my understanding, the original purpose of your visit was to deliver the missive from High Chief Ulamak, and to investigate Nick, yes? Quite so, Your Majesty, I said. Having accomplished these tasks, have you put any thought into when you're going back? Not yet, sire, but we were asked to return as soon as we can. As soon as you can. Wonderful. Oakmore clapped his hands and stood. The crux of your business here has been concluded, so allow me to brief you on a situation that's developing. To the north, there is a university. Within the walls of this university, there are several professors and students who have been studying High Dragon. I have sent word to them that their services are needed here, because I am the only one who can speak High Dragon. Aside from Nick, of course. We all nodded, and a cursory glance around told me that Nick and I were the only ones who were able to predict what Oakmore's thinking. Nick's face was carefully neutral, which almost made me grin. How far away is this university, sir? Nick asked. About 3 weeks by cart. Oakmore's grin widened, which brings me to our problem. I will be quite busy ensuring a proper transition of power between myself and King Asinrath, and won't have much time to act as his translator. As such, Nick, I formally request that you remain in Bolasir to help me translate, until the translators from the university arrive. A period of awkward silence followed. You wish us to stay here for 3 weeks? Nick finally asked. Well, just you, but I assume you're a package deal. Of course you'll be paid for your services. We can count your brothers as your staff, and whoever else you'd like as an aide, he said, eyeing Renth. You'll be paying them out of your pocket, though. How much? 1 gold per day. Nash let out a low whistle, which ended abruptly as we turned to stare at him. Nick then gave me a look as if asking for guidance. I took a moment to think it out. Our original goal was to get Oakmore to send reinforcements to Ulamak, which are either on their way or soon to be so. We also woke the High Dragon and received his aid in determining what to do next. While I do want to get on with the next leg of our journey, 1 gold per day for a minimum of 3 weeks is 21 gold, which is not a paltry sum even when split among 4 people. There is the matter of Imlor, but even if he joins us, we'll still be making quite a bit of money. It would also help ensure that his business stays afloat, and he doesn't have to travel again once we get back to Kokena. This is likely also part of the path that Nick's dream visitor put us on. Unable to think of a good reason to decline, I gave Nick a small nod. "Would 2 gold be too much to ask, Your Majesty?" Nick asked with a buttery tone. Hez turned toward Nick so quickly that I swear I heard Nash's neck crack. The Regent laughed heartily and replied, "It would, but I can do 1 gold and 50 silver per day, but only because I enjoy your company." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Nick said with a bow of his head. "It is my honor to serve." "I'm sure," Oakmore chuckled once more. The discussion was concluded by a massive gust of wind, the sound of titanic wings flapping, and a ground-shuddering thud. King Asinrath had returned, and was standing tall upon the hill on which he had been slumbering for centuries. The sunset caused his white scales to glimmer with shades of purple, orange, and pink. One couldn't help but be transfixed. The mighty dragon looked around until he spotted Oakmore, and growled something in High Dragon. The regent gave us a nod and quickly strode over to the king. "He looks much bigger now that he's awake, doesn't he?" Ormira asked with wonder in her voice. "That he bloody does," Rem said quietly. "Hello, everyone," Imlaw said as he strolled up. "I guess the unloaders weren't full of it after all." "Hi, Imlaw," Nick said with a wave. "Got something to ask you." "You do?" Nick's explanation brought Imlaw up to speed on what had happened with the dragon, including his dream about the god. The gnome's mouth didn't close until Nick mentioned the Regent's Offer. 1.5 gold per day for 3 weeks or so? Imlaw asked, ignoring the uncomfortable subjects at hand. "Yep," Nick replied. "An even split, 5 ways." "Nah," Rem interjected. "Split it 4 ways. I'm already pretty wealthy and happy to help where I can. Just don't tell my uncle or he'll box the ears right off my skull." "You sure?" Nick asked. "Yeah. Doesn't feel right to take your money when I won't be giving you much in return. That's bad business in my opinion." "Alright. Well, what do you think, Imlaw? Will you be willing to stay here and be our ride back?" "It's a very generous offer," Imlaw said, wringing his hands. "Okay, yes. I'll send word to my family to let them know that I'm okay and why I've been delayed." "Thank you, Imlaw," Nick said. Imlaw nodded and walked back the way he came. "I really should get back to my lab," Ormira said. "Come visit me sometime, Yolk. Your mind is a precious resource that I'd love to put to use." "Certainly," I smiled at her. "You can bring Nick along as well, if you can drag him away from the Regent," she laughed, as she turned and waved. "See you soon." I waved back at her, and turned back to my meal. The wind had blown some dirt onto it, but I'm not too picky. I brushed the dirt off and took another bite. The taste remained the same, but now the crunch of the fried meat was accompanied by a somewhat gritty texture. Still better than unseasoned road jerky, though. "Nick, I want you to know that I don't share Rem's altruism," Nash said with a malicious grin. "I'll happily take your coin." "I know, Nash," Nick sighed.